Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 26th of May, 2024. It's great to have you here. Hope you're all doing well and stay cool out there. It looks like it's going to be hot in some places, and we're looking forward to some more sunshine here, or warmer weather here ourselves. Let's hop on over to the agenda and we'll take a look at what we have going today. This, of course, like all of the live streams, is a workshop which goes along with our courses over at school.learnlightandsound.com. You do not have to buy the courses if you want to sign up at the school to be notified when these live streams are happening and what the topic will be ahead of time. So we usually post that the day before. That also gives you the opportunity to submit questions ahead of time if you want to do that. So that's the first thing. Second thing, iZotope RX11 just recently released within the last couple of weeks here. I use iZotope quite frequently, and I wanted to show you some of the new things. I feel like this one's a little bit more controversial. I think people are being a little bit more outspoken about this update, and we'll talk about why in just a minute. Then answer the question, is it worth the upgrade? I think there's a nuanced answer there, and we'll talk about that. And then, of course, we have some questions that were submitted ahead of time, so we'll take a look at those as well. Okay, first up, let's go ahead and hop straight into iZotope RX11. So this is the audio editor. So RX11 consists of kind of two main things, or RX in general, 11's no exception, consists of kind of two main things. There's an audio editor, which includes all of the RX modules over here on the right, which you see. But it also comes with a set of plugins. And those plugins can be used in most digital audio workstations and some like live stream encoding apps, video editing apps, so on and so forth. So not all of the modules can be plugins because some of them are offline processors. And they're starting to make some of those available for the offline processing or the digital audio workstations that have offline processing capabilities, like ARA is one that Logic supports. And so, for example, there's one of them here that I use all the time, the phase module, which unfortunately can only be used offline. That is to say, when you press, it can't run in real time. For example, you can't drop it on a track in a digital audio workstation and play back from the digital audio workstation. It just doesn't work that way. So that's the distinction here between the audio editor and the plugins, and why some of the modules are not available as plugins. But the new things, kind of the main things that are new here in RX11 versus 10, and this happens to be the advanced version. There's also a standard version and an Elements version. Elements has just a very few, and we'll talk about what the differences are in just a minute here. Just a few of these options. Standard has most of them, and advanced has a few more beyond that. The ones we're going to talk about today, though, are Dialog Isolate, which is been updated in a pretty substantial way and was previously only available in the advanced version, is now available in both the standard and the advanced version. So that's actually, to be honest, from my perspective, one of the biggest changes here is that this is now available, not just to the advanced version owners or people that license, but also to the standard version. Big deal there. Another one is Dialog Contour. This is available only in the advanced version. We'll take a quick look at that just so you can see what that's all about. I'll go ahead and close that for now because that is pretty imposing. And then there's also another one which is called Loudness Optimize, which is a little bit different than Loudness Control, which is what I've used traditionally. But we'll maybe if we have time, we'll take a quick peek at that one as well. Those are kind of the main ones we're going to focus on here today. And before I jump into that, let me just head on over to here. One of the questions that people ask is, what's the difference? So there is if you go over to the iZotope site, and you can come into, if it's not showing RX11 right here, you just come to Products, go to RX11, and then there's a Compare RX11 Editions, and that will give you all of the information about the differences between them. So that's one question that we have that was submitted ahead of time. We'll come take a look at that in just a little bit here. All right, so what is Dialog Isolate? And I have to, first of all, hand it to, well, before I get into that, I want to say one thing. If we go back to the main camera for just a moment here, just because we're talking about this does not mean I'm saying you should buy this. I want to be really, really clear about that, because I think there's sort of sometimes there's an assumption that if Curtis is talking about it and he's excited about it, he's endorsing it and saying you should buy it. And that's not the case at all, especially when it comes as an upgrade here. I will say that for some people, I know I'm jumping ahead on the agenda, but for some people, RX11 is not worth the upgrade. It's very much like phones. Just because there's a new phone doesn't mean you need to buy it. Here I'm using the iPhone 14. Haven't bought a 15, don't plan to. I'm not even sure I'm going to buy a 16 when they come out, if the 14 is still serving my needs. What?
I use a 12.
Danny uses an iPhone 12. Are you happy with your iPhone 12?
Yeah,
okay,
great.
It's great. Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to is you have to assess, and we're going to show you here so that you can help you make a decision if you're thinking, should I upgrade? I think it really comes down to, is it going to save you time in a meaningful way, or save you money, or save you tedious effort that you could better use you could spend that time doing something else more meaningful? If the answer is yes to some of those, then I think it potentially is worth the upgrade. Some people are also complaining about the price. The advanced version is ridiculously expensive if you're self-funding all of your work, or if you're doing very small, much smaller budget productions. It doesn't make sense necessarily to spend $1,200. And actually, I think it's $900 right now, but $1,200 to buy RX Advanced when it's just not core to your business. It's not going to change your business substantially in and of itself. So I really feel like if you're going to buy it, there should be basically a business case for it, that it's going to make things better for you. Now, there's also the context of there are lots of other plugins out there that do dialogue, noise reduction, and de-reverberation. And we've covered some of those on our channel and here on the live streams. So we'll have to come back and take a closer look at all of the different options out there. But let's just take a closer look here at RX11. So let's go back over to the Mac and we'll give you a sample here. So here's my awful, horrible audio sample recorded in a way you should never record audio. And that is, go into a bathroom, turn on the fan, and it sounds like this. So here we go. Let me give you a sample of what it sounds like. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk here. I'm in a pretty reverberant space. Let's go ahead and give you a sample here. I'm using a JZ microphones. It's this small diaphragm condenser mic. I just turned off the fan. I'm in a bathroom, and there's plenty of reverberation, as you can hear. Okay, so that's our starting point, and that is awful. So what is dialogue isolate, and what does it do? And I don't know. I think that what's interesting is that our iZotope seems to be a little bit more careful about throwing around the AI term all the time, so in their marketing. My understanding is that they're actually using neural networks. So they train the neural networks based on a variety of different noise sources and at least dialogue, and use that as a means to help this, to power this plugin to identify what's dialogue and what's noise, or what's dialogue and what's reverberation. So by the way, first of all, I appreciate that iZotope isn't just automatically calling that AI. So thank you, iZotope, for that. But let's see how it does in practice. So what I want to do here is you have just a few sliders here. And let me just go ahead and reset this to its default. So the default is a sensitivity at 5. And you can always find out what the setting does by hovering over it. This is biases the separation algorithm to treat more signals as reverb or noise. And we'll experiment with that a little bit so you can hear what that sounds like. Oh, incidentally, here's a huge deal. Down here at the bottom, the quality drop down, you have two options. You have good for real-time processing, and you have best for offline processing. So if you do need to use something to help clean up audio that you're using for a live stream or some sort of other live type of format, this is actually fast enough now to run in real time in that option. So it may not be quite as good. It may have to sacrifice some things a little bit, maybe a few more artifacts or something like that, but it is an option now. We're going to go ahead and put it in the best offline mode here for us today. Now you have three faders, if you will, at the top. One for voice, one for reverb, and one for noise. Now typically if you're trying to clean up a dialogue recording, you're going to leave the voice where it is, and then you're going to try and reduce these other things like reverb and noise. And you can choose how much you want to reduce. And you can go pretty extreme here. It even says all the way down to minus infinity. We'll do that just as kind of a stress test, but probably I would generally find that I'd need to tune it a little bit more than that. So that's what we'll do. All right, so let's go ahead and let's run through it. And the first thing I need to take care of is this horrible fan noise. So we're going to use the noise fader here and pull that down some. And I'm going to go ahead and play through. And in fact, why don't we just play through this portion here? I'll highlight that because that's where the fan is. I turn it on again later. But let's just start there, and I will adjust it. And ideally, use your best headphones available to you. Make it a little bit easier. It's going to be tough, possibly, if you're listening on your phone's speakers. So here we go. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk here. I'm in a pretty reverberant space. Let's go ahead and give you a sample here. I'm using a JZ microphones. It's this small diaphragm condenser mic. I just turned off the fan. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk here. I'm in a pretty reverberant space. Let's go ahead and give you a sample here. I'm using a JZ microphones. It's this small diaphragm condenser mic. I just turned off the fan. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk here. I'm in a pretty reverberant space. Let's go ahead and give you a sample here. I'm using a JZ microphones. It's this small diaphragm condenser mic. I just turned off the fan. Okay, so there's the noise reduction first of all, and I would say that that seems to me to be a substantial step forward from the previous version of Dialog Isolate in RX9 and RX10. This one actually seems a bit more transparent, seems to impose fewer artifacts, so it's less obvious that you're processing the audio, and you could go pretty extreme on that. We went to minus 36, and it did introduce some artifacting, but not much, and even when we went to minus 24, it got not all, but most of the fan noise and seemed to impose even fewer artifacts at that level. So it's a trade-off. You have to decide how much are you willing to accept in terms of artifacts versus how much do you really want to absolutely eliminate that noise. But that worked pretty nicely there. So why don't we go ahead and leave that at about minus 24 and right in that realm there. And then now that we've done that, let's have a listen to how it's doing with reverb. So I'm going to maybe jump ahead to this section here and let's play through that. I just turned off the fan. I'm in a bathroom and there's plenty of reverberation, as you can hear. And now I can also turn on the bathroom fan. So we can really stress Dialog Isolate and see how well Dialog Isolate is able to handle not only the noise, but also the reverberation. Let's see what we get here. I just turned off the fan. I'm in a bathroom and there's plenty of reverberation, as you can hear. And now I can also turn on the bathroom fan. So we can really stress Dialog Isolate and see how well Dialog Isolate is able to handle not only the noise, but also the reverberation. Let's see what we get here. I just turned off the fan. I'm in a bathroom and there's plenty of reverberation, as you can hear. And now I can also turn on the bathroom fan. So we can really stress Dialog Isolate and see how well Dialog Isolate is able to handle not only the noise, but also the reverberation. Let's see what we get here. I just turned off the fan. I'm in a bathroom and there's plenty of reverberation, as you can hear. And now I can also turn on the bathroom fan. So we can really stress Dialog Isolate and see how well Dialog Isolate is able to handle not only the noise, but also the reverberation. Let's see what we get here. I just turned off the fan. I'm in a bathroom and there's plenty of reverberation, as you can hear. And now I can also turn on the bathroom fan. So we can really stress Dialog Isolate and see how well Dialogue Isolate is able to handle not only the noise, but also the reverberation. Let's see what we get here. I just turned off the fan. I'm in a bathroom, and there's plenty of reverberation, as you can hear. Okay, so interesting. Obviously, when you have both noise and reverberation, I think that's a more challenging thing because it's having to do much more kind of intensive processing. But it did a pretty good job. Again, at this point, if you have a recording of this nature, I think really what it's coming down to, at least from my perspective when I'm working on video or a short film, I would be looking to provide the audience with something that's understandable and not terribly offensive. So for me, it's going to be a little bit of a trade-off. I want to get rid of the most distracting noise, the most distracting reverberation, to make it more understandable and easier to listen to, but I don't want to take it too far where I'm starting to get a lot of artifacts, and we did start to get some artifacts, but this is probably, if I were working on a documentary film, for example, and I wanted to kind of provide the best experience, I'd probably end up somewhere in this area here. And you could also do it in multiple passes. You could do a light pass, render it out, and then come back and do another light pass. So a lot of times it seems like RX seems to do better at it, at processing that way. But that's a quick look at the dialogue isolate. Let's take a pause here and go over to the chat and see what we have going in the chat. If there's anything you want to note here, if there's any questions, any observations, let us know in the chat. Bangs says, reminder, Neutron 4 Elements is free through July 8th on the iZotope site for people that want to dip a toe in the iZotope pool. There you go. iZotope pool sounds a little funny, but I understand your point. Thank you so much. Wash your mouth out with soap. I have to buy every new blank and don't tell me I don't have to, LOL. Well, I mean, for those that are tech enthusiasts, and if that's your thing, by all means do it. But what I am saying is that for the people that are pausing and saying, is this worth $300 for the advanced version upgrade, or is it worth $200 for the standard version upgrade? I think that's where you have to ask yourself whether or not this will save you substantial amounts of time or effort to make it worthwhile. And it's not, I mean, that's, if you consider what your time is worth, it's not going to take a lot. I mean, $199 if you're on the standard version in particular, because on the standard version, you on RX, any version prior to RX 11, you don't have dialogue isolate. And this is the quickest, easiest, and probably most effective noise reduction for a lot of scenarios. And it's a really useful tool. Save you a lot of time. So it's just a question you have to answer for yourself. But Matt, I understand your sentiment. You do you. Christopher says the D-reverb sounds kind of hollow sounding. It does. We're going to use it on a different reverb sample as well. So this was a very boxy, small bathroom. You'd probably have to do some additional EQ as well to manage some of the resonances in there. But it is kind of hollow. Christopher says, I may be biased, but I still think Cedar's live DNS sounds better, but it's also a lot more expensive. When you play with the expensive tools, you get a little spoiled. Daniela, I did delete the iZotope Products Special RX Advanced. I now use Spectral Layer Pro from Steinberg. Very good. I upgraded from RX 9, this is John, to 11, and at the moment I am happy. I use Spectral Layers from Steinberg. I don't know if you used to or you also use Spectral Layers, but thank you, John. Mark, can you use different settings of dialogue isolate within the same audio clip? Yes, you can. So you can highlight. So you can apply it just to highlighted portions if you want to do that. So for example, when I turn the fan off, we don't really need the noise reduction. We could turn that off during that portion and process just with the D-reverb for that portion where there's no fan. But yeah, you can definitely do that. You can do multiple passes. It's an offline process if you're doing it here in the audio editor. So yeah, you can definitely do that. You're right. It's my issue I have with the Rodecaster Pro 2, but want the Mackie, but it's just not the cost. Yeah, they're yeah, we all have to make decisions, and I trust you all to make good decisions for yourself. I'm just here to provide a little bit of information. So, cool. All right, let's call it there. So that is dialogue isolate. Let's get another audio sample up here just so we can hear that. This is another sample. In this case, I was in the kitchen. The dishwasher is running, and there is some reverberation. It's got wood floors, and this is what this one sounds like. All right, now we're in another room here with plenty of reflections, hard surfaces. This is the kitchen, and we have a dishwasher running. All right, now we're in another room here with plenty of reflections, hard surfaces. This is the kitchen, and we have a dishwasher running. And again, I'm talking into a boom microphone. This is a JZ microphone, small diaphragm condenser. And it's boomed in a pretty typical position, about, I would say, 18 inches. Is that 35, 40 centimeters from me? And this is what it sounds like. So there are a couple things we're looking for here. How well can it manage the noise, the background noise, and how well can dialogue isolate handle the reverberation? So let's see what we get. All right, now we're in another room here with plenty of reflections, hard surfaces. This is the kitchen, and we have a dishwasher running. And again, I'm talking into a boom microphone. This is a JZ microphone, small diaphragm condenser. And it's boomed in a pretty typical position, about, I would say, 18 inches. Is that 35, 40 centimeters from me? Okay, that's probably, if I were doing a documentary film, that's probably about what I would do there. Maybe even a little lighter on the noise reduction, but the reverb in particular, I would definitely take a light touch on that. Again, what you're trying to do is, when you listen to something that is dialogue that has a lot of reverberation, it can be kind of mentally taxing for the audience to listen to that for a long period of time, especially if the reverberation is making it a little bit more difficult to understand what they're saying. So if you want, when you're preparing or mixing a film or a video, typically my thinking is I want to make it as easy as possible for people to experience this. And so I just want to take the edge off. And I feel like if you push it too hard, it's starting to get that kind of talking into a pillow sound. Here we ended up at about minus 4.5 dB. And I might even back off of the noise a little bit here. Maybe let's try a little bit more here. All right, now we're in another room here with plenty of reflections, hard surfaces. This is the kitchen, and we have a dishwasher running. And again, I'm talking into a boom microphone. This is a JZ microphone, small diaphragm condenser. And it's boomed in a pretty typical position, about, I would say, 18 inches. Is that 35, 40 centimeters from me? And this is what it sounds like. So there are a couple things we're looking for here. How well can it manage the noise, the background noise, and how well can dialogue isolate handle the reverberation? So let's see what we get. All right, now we're in another room here with plenty of reflections, hard surfaces. This is the kitchen, and we have a dishwasher running. Okay, so there's an example of where I'd probably end up. So we ended up with about 10 dB of noise reduction, 4 dB of reverberation reduction. A note here that I should point out, there used to be a dialogue D-reverb. That no longer exists in iZotope RX11. So now instead that's built into the dialogue isolate, and it does substantially better. The dialogue D-reverb was okay. This one sounds a little bit more transparent to me, and usually only requires just a little bit. So that is the dialogue isolate on a second sample there. Let's go ahead and take a pause. Anything in the chat there that we need to cover, Danny? He's going to take a look. John, yes, I use both sets of software. Sometimes one performs better than the other. That's a fantastic point. I'm really glad you brought that up, John. And that's the secret here, is that it seems like with all of the options available to us today, that some of them tend to do better than others. Accentize has a de-reverb, which is really quite good as well, very effective, and denoiser. Waves Clarity VX also does a really nice job, so it kind of just depends. One thing I would recommend is if you've not been to Production Expert, online there's a place called Production Expert. They mostly cover music, but they also do some post-production. And they had a piece where they compared. They actually had all their newsletter people. Well, not all the people that subscribed to the newsletter were able to vote for what they felt sounded the best, processing several different audio samples with different plugins, and that's definitely worth a look as well if you wanted to go take a look at that. It's over at Production Expert. And I would just they have one for de-reverb and another one for noise reduction, as I recall. So definitely worth a check. That was before RX11 came out, so it doesn't include RX11s. RX10 did not fare very well, as I recall, at least on the de-reverb part. The de-reverb in RX10 and earlier didn't sound super transparent to me. As soon as it started reducing the reverb, it sounded pretty obvious that it was. Now, I should also say there is still a de-reverb in RX11. If we switch back to the Mac here really quickly, there's sort of this general purpose one. This one was one of the more difficult ones to use in my experience, and also didn't give me the greatest results. This one's probably going to be better for instruments in a space where there's lots of reverb and you wanted to kind of manage that. It's kind of more of a general purpose one, so not recommended. But if you're doing it with Dialogue, I would definitely use the Dialogue Isolate reverb reduction here. Cool. Okay, Daniel, I own the previous post-production suite version and will wait until later this year when they have a sale on the iZotope Everything bundle. Upgrade from any previous version of post-production suite. Yeah, that makes sense, Daniel. Yeah, you can wait for the sales if you're trying to save a little bit. If you have Clarity VX Pro and Clarity de-reverb, is Dialogue Isolate still worth it? I have not compared them head-to-head recently, and it depends on the audio sample. Here's the thing. If you have those and you're happy with them, I would stick with them. I wouldn't make the switch necessarily. What I would say is that it also depends on the audio sample. Some plugins do better on some samples than others, and the tables kind of flip with others. It just depends. So it's not always quite so straightforward, unfortunately. I would say at this point, the top ones are probably Accentize's de-reverb and Waves Clarity VX, the de-reverb part and the noise reduction part, and then Dialogue Isolate in RX11, standard or advanced. Those, to me, I haven't used spectral layers, so that's another one that's worth looking at. But of those three, and I've heard all three of them, those three seem to be kind of leading the pack in my personal hands-on experience. Is it worth it? I don't know. I use a plugin called Clear. It was originally named Goyo. Yes, Clear is another very good one. Works really well, and I believe it's $99. Yeah, that one's a straight noise reduction. It does a pretty good job as well. Like I said, so many options. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at Dialogue Contour while we're in here. So let's jump back over into the Mac.
Got the questions.
Oh.
Still.
Yeah, we've got the questions. This is part of the plan here. So we're going to listen to this sample here first. And let me actually first give you some background. What is Dialogue Contour? What's its purpose? And let me go ahead and reset this to default here. Its purpose is to tweak the inflections on spoken word dialogue. And the kind of the main use case, at least what I see it as its main use case, is that when you're doing what are typically called Franken edits, if you have a video with some dialogue and you have to cut together a bunch of different lines of dialogue to get it back to where it needs to be. If it's a narrative piece, you're just trying to get the right inflections and kind of piece together the various takes to get the right performance. That's one case where it's useful. In my work as we do education work, sometimes the inflection is just a little bit off at the end of a phrase, for example, and we wanted it to kind of inflect up instead of inflect down because it gives a very different, it kind of sends a different is it a nonverbal cue? It's not really it's not a verbal cue exactly. It's more of the kind of the inflection as opposed to what the words are. In any case, those are some examples of when something like dialogue contour can be really useful. And let me go ahead and give you a sample here. So I'm going to just highlight this first section. Actually, I can't see what I'm highlighting, so let's highlight that first section there. Once I highlight that, that's the only thing that is brought here into the plugin. And so here's an example of a really flat performance. Let me play this for you. This is a recording of a very monotone recording, or voicing, and this is not at all what we want. This is a recording. Okay, so that's where we're starting. Let's crank up the variation. So we have the ability to kind of make it more variable, to make it a little bit more lively, and that's what the variation slider does. That's the main thing that we're going to kind of focus on here. I haven't gotten into this one quite as deeply, so there's more that I need to do, but I'll show you a few things. But let's go ahead and just bump the variation up. And what you can see is as I do that, notice here, the line represents essentially pitch. And so the idea here is that if I increase the variation, it's going to change the pitch a little bit more on these different words. So it's going to bring some of them down and some of them up. So you should get more variation. So let's go ahead and do a preview, and you can hear what it sounds like now. Of a very monotone. Whoops. This is a recording of a very monotone recording, or voicing, and this is... Okay, too much, way too much. All right, let's go lighter on that. Let's go 25 or 20, somewhere in that range. Let's do a preview again. Obviously, you don't want to turn your voice into a robot. This is a recording of a very monotone recording, or voicing, and this is not at all what we want. This is... Okay. That's a buzzer. No. Here's the reality. You have to have a pretty good performance from the start to make this work. So this is probably not going to do it. Now, what you can do is you can be more specific about it. So I can just go ahead and reset that, for example. And I might, for example, come up here to the start and I might say, you know what, I want to kind of get a little bit higher pitched here at the start. And I can take this curve smoothing and smooth out the curve a little bit so it's not so so linear. And then I might say, let me go ahead and play through that again and see where I want to kind of pitch up. This is a recording of a very monotone recording, or voicing. And this is not... Maybe something over here. You can pitch down as well. So if you wanted to bring something down a bit. And maybe I wanted this section to still be a little more lively. Let's try that. This is a recording of a very monotone recording, or voicing, and this is not at all what we want. Let's go more extreme just to see what happens. This is a recording of a very monotone recording, or voicing, and this is not at all what we want. See, this is an example where, again, you're probably better off re-recording this, and you probably should have caught that during production. So let's go ahead and reset. Let's go to a different section here. Let me go to this section. This will be a little bit more interesting, I think, and probably a more realistic use case. So let's play through where we're starting here. What we want. This is one that's much more dynamic, and it goes up and down, and you can hear that my tone changes quite substantially over time. Okay, so there's one. Let's go ahead and say, hey, Curtis sounded like he just drank a bunch of green tea or something. No, coffee, I don't know what. Something, a little bit on the, maybe a little on the high energy side. So let's see if we can kind of drop that one down a little bit. Let's say maybe go minus 40-ish. And let's see what that does for us here. Kind of just mellow it out a little bit. What we want. This is one that's much more dynamic, and it goes up and down, and you can hear that my tone changes quite substantially over time. Nope, not what we want. Let's go milder, -20. What we want. This is one that's much more dynamic, and it goes up and down, and you can hear that my tone changes quite substantially over time. Nope, we're going to go ahead and just reset the whole thing. Not getting what we want there. Let me just give you another example here. Sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down. Sometimes there is something. Okay. So if I go here. At the end of the sentence it goes down. Sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down. And whoa. Extreme. Sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down. And sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down. Sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down. Sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down. Okay, so there's some, you have to do a very light touch here. It seems like I don't have a lot of experience with this, but what I am experiencing here is that you need to use a very light touch, and the amount of change you can make is fairly subtle. So I'm not seeing this, I'm seeing this as a potentially useful tool, but Robot Curtis is not real. Danger, Will Robinson. Yes, I completely understand. Jeff Goldblum is in the house. Yeah, some funny stuff going on there. So you should apply that filter to sound speeds. That would be fun. This could be a fun plugin. So we have some things coming up here in my work. We'll see. I'll try this a little bit more, get more experience with it, and see where we can get with it. But it feels a little bit problematic. I've got a pretty powerful computer, so I don't know if it's the real-time processing. We'd have to render. Maybe we'd have to render it and then hear what it sounds like. Let's try that, just out of curiosity. Oh wait, I wonder if a sharper curve would work better. That's a fair question. So let's reset the curve.
You're at 1240, by the way.
I'm at 1240, so I need to get to the questions here pretty quick. Okay, let's preview that. Sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down, and sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down, and sometimes. Let's render it and listen to it now. Sometimes there is something at the end of the sentence that goes down. Yeah, it's still kind of, there's still plenty of artifacts there. So definitely need some more experience with that before I'm going to feel really comfortable with that and feel like it's really something to recommend. So overall, RX11, is it worth the upgrade? Totally depends on you. The dialogue isolate is the biggest thing from my perspective. There's also we haven't talked about the loudness optimization module, or loudness optimize module. We'll come back and take a closer look at that, but based on what I know so far, if the dialogue isolate is something that's of use to you, I think the biggest advantage would be for the people that are on the standard version of iZotope RX. Upgrading to the new 11, you'd get that dialogue isolate for the first time, and I think the dialogue isolate is genuinely useful in a lot of circumstances. So, all right, with that, let's go to our question and answer. These are questions that were submitted ahead of time, so we'll go ahead and take a look at what we've got going here. Rory says, I think that there is a need for serious discussion about whether people who already have RX, especially RX 10 Advanced, should pay $300 to upgrade. I've seen Jeff Manchester's demonstration of dialogue isolation and dialogue contour. These are not new features, and what I didn't see was Jeff demonstrating how meaningful the upgrade is. The other feature that Native Instruments is pushing is indeed a new feature, fine-tuning loudness for streaming platforms. That's the loudness optimization, by the way. That's pretty niche. I agree with you, Roy, 100%. So I don't know that it's going to be like a no-brainer upgrade for everybody that has RX 10. For those that have RX 10 standard and dialogue isolate would be of use to you, that would be a worthy upgrade in my mind. But from 10 to 11 advanced, I would say dialogue isolate is better in 11, but definitely the dereverberation seems like a step forward. But I wouldn't. I mean, it depends. Depends on if that price of $300 is worth it for you. So, great point. Danny has a whole series of questions. His first question is, how is authentication done now that iZotope has been acquired by Native Instruments? While I love iZotope products in concept, keeping the software authentication on my computers has been an ordeal, specifically using iLock on Macintosh. So, Danny, I will say that I have been using the iZotope product portal to do my authorization. So you have two options for authorization. You can authorize using the iZotope product portal app, which just authorizes it to an individual computer, which is how I do it. I do all my RX work on my most powerful computer, period. If you use iLock, and actually with the product portal, you could do this too. You could deauthorize it on one computer and authorize it on another. You can do that. Using iLock is another way to do that. I know iLock is not everybody's favorite app, but that is one way to do it as well. So those are the two options that you have with RX now that they're under Native Instruments. So iZotope Product Portal and iLock. Okay, next question. Does RX11 run native on Apple Silicon? iZotope's website is confusing. Well, let's take a look. So if we come back over to the Mac, what I'm going to do here, the way you can find out if an app is Apple Silicon native or not is you come over into About This Mac, you choose More Info, you go to the bottom, you get your system report, you come down to Applications, takes it a moment, it has to read all the applications on the drive. We're going to go ahead and scroll down to iZotope, and where is it? Here we go. iZotope RX11 audio editor is in fact a universal binary, so it is runs natively on Apple Silicon. I also have Audio Lens from iZotope on here, also a universal binary. The only thing from iZotope on here that is not, it is Intel only, is the product portal. So that's the app I was talking about for authorization. So that runs under Rosetta 2. Not a big deal because you're not doing heavy-duty processing with that. So at least for the audio editor, it is Apple Silicon native. I don't know about the plugins. That's a different question altogether. And I don't know if those use Rosetta to translate them. That I just don't know the answer to that. Okay, back to the questions. Next one from Danny. How is RX11 used with Final Cut Pro 10? Well, it's used just like any other app. You only have access to the to the plugins that are the modules that are plugins, and the way it works, I can show you here. I'll just bring up Final Cut if you give me just a moment here. It's having to go through. I'll actually have to come back to that because it's going and reading all of the plugins right now. So I will come back to that one, Danny.
I think there was another one previously.
Another question?
Go back to. Oh, no. Okay. You got it.
Okay. All right. Next question from Danny is, there are multiple upgrade paths to RX11 Advanced. I find iZotope bundles to be confusing. Specifically, they sell blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to go through all the details here, but the question is about licensing and upgrades, and it's confusing, and it seems like there are a million options. Danny, I can just only agree with you. If you want to find out what your upgrade options are, log into your iZotope account and go to your loyalty offers, and that'll tell you exactly what options are available to you. So I don't have any more insight than that. As far as automatic free upgrades, if something in one of the bundles gets a major version upgrade 90 or 180 days later, I don't know what the answer is to that. You'll probably need to contact iZotope support to get a clear answer on that. Apologies, I don't have that answer. It appears that Final Cut is not in a hurry today. So I think we may have to force quit that. The short version, though, Danny, is that it works like any other plugin in Final Cut. You just go over into your plugins under Audio. There'll be a line for iZotope. You just drag one of the iZotope plugins, RX plugins, onto a clip within the timeline, and then you can pull up the UI to adjust any of its settings. So that's how it works in Final Cut. All right. Question from Mike, and this is a good one. We actually talked about this a little bit earlier, and that is, could you please discuss the differences between the different versions, advanced, standard, of iZotope RX11. I'm considering purchasing the standard edition to help with minimizing mouth noise in both dialogue and voiceover recordings. I want to be sure that the standard edition will get the job done. Thank you. Okay, great. Let's switch on over. So again, coming over to the iZotope website, go to the products, go to RX, and then click on the option for compare, and you can see the difference. So first of all, it gives you a table that tells you which plugins are included with each edition. Then there's a second one. You'll notice this is just the RX audio editor and what's available in each edition. Now, it does not, you do not get the audio editor if you get the Elements version, unlike RX9. So they discontinued that. So if you need anything that's listed here in the audio editor that's not a plugin, and I think Phase is a great example of that, you get that in both the standard and the advanced version, but it is not available, no longer available in the Elements version, sadly. So I think the big difference, if I had to say, the big difference is, so the difference, I think Elements is basically just a few plugins. It's declick, declip, dehum, dereverb, again, which is not that amazing. It's a lot of fiddling and not very much. It does give you the repair assistant to kind of give you a head start. It'll listen to your audio and make a recommendation. And then you also have the voice denoise, so the kind of more standard type of denoising option. So that's the Elements version. Standard gives you almost everything that the Advanced does, minus ambiance match. We haven't talked about this. So this is a Pro Tools only plugin that does some of the things we've talked about here, but it does a few different things in addition. So what it does is it tries, if you're cutting between a boom mic and a lav mic, it will actually EQ one to sound like the other. So generally it will EQ the lavalier to sound more like the boom microphone. It will also allow you to match the ambiance. So when you cut between things, a boom mic and a lav mic, for example, the room tone immediately changes. And it helps to kind of smooth that out and make that sound more consistent as well. It's a very, very useful plugin for dialogue editors, for re-recording mixers, and things like that. So that's a pretty high-end kind of piece. The de-rustle is only available in the advanced version. That's the one that, if you have clothing rustle, it's supposed to help with that. I've never found it to be, it helps a little bit, but it leaves a lot of artifacts as well. So that's one. And pretty much that's it. Everything else is pretty much the same between the two until you get down here to the audio editor. It also has a few additional things. It has azimuth, it has center extract. Center extract, incidentally, can be useful for kind of noise reduction at times. Again, de-rustle and de-wind and deconstruct. Sorry, it's a deconstruct I'm thinking of. Deconstruct is really actually useful for reducing noise as well, if you want to do it on a more, if you want to have a little bit more control. But those are only available in the advanced version. Dialogue contour, which we just showed, only available in the advanced version. Dialogue isolate, also available in the standard version, which is great. EQ match, only available in advanced. Leveler, only available in advanced. And spectral recovery and wow and flutter, also only available in advanced. My advice for you, Mike, would be that probably I would start with standard, and that's probably going to get you most of what you need for voiceover recordings and dialogue for video recordings. Yeah, I think that's going to be probably everything you need. You can always upgrade later without having to pay the full price, but I would start with standard. Okay, last question is from Matt. This is totally unrelated to iZotope RX at least. Have you tried the new Shure mic? I got to play with one at the Grand Ole Opry this week. It's the Shure Nexodyne 8, and it comes in two versions, a cardioid version and a super cardioid version. Totally new design. Short answer, Matt, is I have not tried it. However, I listened to some of the things you sent over to me. For those that are not familiar, so it's a dynamic microphone. So just like Shure makes the SM58, the 57, the KSM8, they now have a Nexodyne 8. And it has two capsules for each microphone. And it uses those to optimize both the polar pattern and in essence to reject sound from behind that you don't want to pick up. So it's kind of technologically it's a very new thing, but I have not tried it yet. So it's supposed to be kind of the next generation beyond what they did with the KSM 8. Sounds interesting. One of the things that they kind of sold is that they interviewed all these people that tried the microphone. They're all live performers. This is a live performance mic generally is what it was designed for. And they all said, I don't have to sing as hard. It's not as hard for me to get the sound that I want with this microphone versus other traditional dynamic microphones. So I don't know what that means. Does that mean that it's a more of a mid-forward sound voicing to it so that they don't compete with the other instruments as much? I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. So it'll be interesting to try it out and see how it does, but not yet. Okay. With that, let's go back to the chat and see what we have going on in the chat today. If you have any questions, please tag them with @CurtisJuddAudio. Hampton says, Clarity VX Pro and D-Reverb usually, but not always work very well. Would like to hear how they compare with RX11. Me too. It's on my list of things to do. Daniela, RX in my mind is much aggressive and destructive. I personally do not like this destructive way in audio. For noise reduction, I use Brewstry from the Swedish company Clevegrand. It's substantially better than RX, noise reducer, and non-destructive. $60, but I bought with education discount. They gave me an 80% discount. Very good. Thank you for sharing. That's one I hadn't heard of before. And like I said, there are tons of options out there. As a side note, voice isolation built into Final Cut Pro works pretty well. Another great point. We did test that on one of our live streams, it was one of our videos on our main channel quite some time ago, and it is surprisingly good. Works sometimes really well and other times not well, but you do get to choose how much you apply. So, all right. Question, switching gears, any update to the Deity Theos wireless audio artifacts issue you mentioned a few weeks ago? Thanks. Nothing that I have heard of. From my point of view, it's in Deity's hands at this point. It may well be part of the algorithm that they're using for modulating the audio for wireless transmission. It sounds substantially better to me when it's recorded on the transmitter than when it's wirelessly transmitted from the transmitter to the receiver. I don't know if we're going to see any issues to that. It may be a hardware issue. I don't know. Maybe they're working on something. I don't know. Next time I talk to Andrew at Deity, I will see if he has what he has to say about it.
Two related questions from different people.
Okay, two related questions. Are you happy you upgraded to RX11? And you really like this just to have fancy results? I'm an educator. I'm a buyer's advocate. So for me, it's to help you make decisions. Am I going to use it a lot? We actually could have used the Dialogue Isolate, the D-Reverb, on a recent thing that we did at work. We were using the Dialogue D-Reverb, and it was not getting us the great results we were hoping for. I think this would probably have done better on that sample than that other one did. So was it worth a $300 upgrade? Yeah. We're running a business, and if we could save the time of completely re-recording that, we probably would. However, the other theme here is, if you haven't invested in sound blankets, get yourself invested in $300 worth of sound blankets before you go upgrading this. That maybe get you better results in the long run. So that's how I feel about it. Would the new Dialogue Isolate work better with fixing clothing rustle on those darn starchy button-ups, or would you recommend something else? I doubt it. I would not expect that to do really well on heavily starched button-down shirts. No, I think the de-rustle would be better, but again, that's where I try to just stay. If it's a really rustly shirt, it's been heavily starched, I do whatever I can to get away from that. I'll either go just straight with just a boom, or I'll mount the lav mic somewhere else, maybe in a tie. Even then, you're still going to pick up some rustle. We may, if it's possible, have the person move less. But if their clothing is making noise, it's making noise, and cleaning that up in post, I haven't had great luck with it. Oh, thank you. So, Kumaran, this is just a huge thank you, Curtis, for your Fairlight course. Finally know how layered audio works. Was stumped before I took your course. So glad that was helpful. And yes, layered audio is a pretty cool feature in DaVinci Resolve Fairlight. Udo, I work with RX10 Advanced. From what I heard on YouTube, DX Revive is still a lot better than Dialogue Isolate RX11. will spend $400 for DX Revive. So yeah, DX Revive is not cheap. I think what you're going to see over the next while is they're just going to keep competing with each other and getting better and better. In my experience on the samples I've used, they're about the same so far. I can do a head-to-head as well, but in my experience, they're about the same. On some samples, DX Revive may be better. Not sure about Acon Digital Deverberate 3 and RX. I'm working with both. Yeah, that's going to be one. Yeah, like I said, it's just... The most I've ever spent on an iZotope upgrade is $200, and that's for the full production suite. I wish they'd add RX Advanced to their annual subscription plan. Yeah, I don't know. I don't do the subscription. I buy the licenses and the upgrades. So I didn't know they didn't include RX on the subscription. That's interesting. Didn't get much time to play with the mic, but people I trust who know their stuff are impressed. It's a $300 mic. It'd be worth, I'd love to try it out. If you happen to get your hands on one, looking forward to your review, Matt. Christopher says, I believe one of the things they are promoting with Nexodyne has better feedback rejection on stage. Interesting. So maybe they're using that second capsule somehow to do that. That's interesting. Any sense of how it compares to DaVinci Resolve Voice Isolate? I found this to work better than the DaVinci Resolve Voice Isolate, personally. But again, it's going to depend sample to sample. There is a trial version, so if you wanted to try it on a particular sample that you have, then you can always do that. Again, I want to be very super clear here. I am not here saying you should buy iZotope. Absolutely not saying that. iZotope RX. I just wanted to demonstrate its capabilities here, and that's it. That's all. So you can make an educated decision. I will be looking forward to doing a comparison of, at least from my perspective, some of the top 3, so you can hear those in an upcoming video. So look for that. All right. Anything else in the chat before we go? Okay. I think it's that time, friends. It's time to get out there, wrap this up, and go make some great sound. Wait. Okay, here we go. So Mark says, I had 2 crackling shirts with lavs and was able to use Viviana's skin to reduce them. Worked well for the recording. So for those that are not familiar, Viviana makes a variety of products for mounting lavalier microphones, and I think that's what you're talking about, Mark. I'm not familiar with a skin-specific product, but yeah, during recording is the time to address that issue in as much as possible. So if you have anything to do with the production, catch it then, because in post, it's a crapshoot as to whether or not you'll be able to get done what you need to get done.
Two more.
Oh, Danny's opened things up.
No, I haven't. There are 2 more that we'll do, and then we'll
2 more.
close it down.
1. Fatiri, I was worried that would be the answer, but it seems about right. Thanks, Curtis.
So.
Yeah, there's no absolute mind-blowing clear winner here. And then finally from Matt, I don't do product reviews, but work on getting one for you. Deal? Deal. Thank you so much, Matt. All right, friends, get out there, make some great sound, and we'll talk to you again next week. Take care.